One evening, Gordon returned home after a repaint at the works. He was quick to boast.
"You know, I must say, blue really is the proper color for an engine. In particular, it's very suitable for a very important engine, like me in fact."
Donald rolled his eyes. "Now hold on, Gordon. Black need be such a bad color either. Again, I oughta proud to wear it, and you wouldn't catch us in anything else."
"I like my green,"
Henry agreed.
"I hate to be red like James. People would think I was a fire engine."
"At least people can see me coming," retorted James. "And I don't disappear in the background like some other engines I could mention. If it weren't for the noise, you'd need a yellow and black front like Mavis." Henry's protests were drowned in the laughter of the other engines, and he went to sleep wondering how to pay James out. Henry was still cross the next morning. "What could be wrong? What could be wrong?" wondered the coaches, anxiously as Henry pulled away noisily from the station.
"Do come along! Do come along!"
Henry snorted impatiently. He had a fast run, but it didn't improve Henry's temper. He bumped the coaches when they stopped at a station. And again when they started. No one noticed a rattle from beneath Henry's footplate as he snorted away. And soon the train was running well.
"Hurry! Hurry! Hurry!"
Faster and faster they went. At last, Henry began to feel better. Suddenly he heard a crack from below his cab. "Look out!" shouted the driver. He applied the brakes while the fireman scrambled across to the footplate. He was just in time. Both men watched in horror as a widening gap opened between Henry and his tender. Henry stopped as soon as he could. The automatic brake halted his tender, and the train some way far behind. "We must drop Henry's fire," said the driver urgently. "It will be dangerous to let him boil dry now that we can get no more water from the tender." The fireman agreed. "Sorry, old boy," he said to Henry. "Just when we got it going nicely, too. But if you hadn't banged about so much, you wouldn't have broken your tender coupling." While the fireman dealt with the fire, the driver went back to tell the signalman what had happened. When he returned, he found Henry completely hidden in a huge cloud of black smoke, which billowed from beneath his cab. The fireman emerged, choking. "Henry's fire set the sleepers alight," he spluttered. "You stay here. I'm going to phone the fire brigade." Henry's driver eased Henry clear of the fire. Soon the fire brigade arrived and quickly fought the fire. Edward came to take his train on. Henry felt most uncomfortable. Workmen made Henry a temporary coupling. They rejoined him to his tender, and his driver and fireman lit a new fire and drove him gently home. Edward, who of course had seen everything, told the others. They were careful what they talked about that night. As for Henry, he was touchy on the subject of fires for quite some time afterwards. But James was quick to notice that from then on, Henry stopped making rude remarks about the color of fire engines.
Escape! Douglas had taken the midnight goods to a station on the other railway. He was shunting, ready for his return journey, when he heard a faint... That sounds like an engine, he thought. But came again. This time it sounded almost despairing. Who's there? He asked. A whisper came. Are you a Fat Controller's engine? Aye, I'm proud of it. Thank goodness. I'm Oliver. We're escaping to your railway, but we've run out of coal and have no more steam. Is it from scrap you're escaping? Yes. Then it's glad I'll be to help ye. But we maun work fast. Both crews joined in. They took off Oliver's side rods, wrote out transit labels, and chalked scrap everywhere they could. Douglas marshalled Oliver in front of his train. No time to turn round, he panted. A maun run tender first. Yelled a passing diesel. A steamer's escaping! Yoo-hoo! Douglas puffed firmly on. Take no notice, he counselled. But they were stopped before they could clear the station's throat. The foreman's lamp shone on Oliver. Ah, he exclaimed. A Western engine. His light flickered further back. A Western auto coach and goods brake too. You can't take these. Can we? No, said Douglas's driver. They're all for us. See for yourself. Douglas's guard showed him the labels and papers. Oliver's crew, hiding in the coach, hardly dared to breathe. Seems in order, said the foreman grudgingly. But it's queer. Sure and it is, began the guard. But I could tell you queerer. So could I, interrupted the foreman. Right away, guard. A near thing, puffed Douglas with relief. We've had worse, smiled Oliver. We ran at night. Friendly signalmen would pass us from box to box when no trains were about. We got on well till Control heard about a mystery train. Then they tried to hunt us down. What did you do? A signalman let us hide on an old quarry branch. Driver, fireman and guard blocked the cutting with rubbish and levered one of the approach rails away. We stayed there for days, with diesels baying and growling like hounds outside. I was very frightened then. Small blame to ye, said Douglas feelingly. Presently they rumbled over the bridge and onto the Fat Controller's railway. We're home! They can't catch you now. Tell Isabel and Toad, please. Douglas called out the news and heard a joyful ting-a-ling-a-ling, ting-a-ling-a-ling. He was surprised. Oliver chuckled. That's Isabel, he said. There's a bell on her, you see. She's clever. When we go out together, I pull one way and push the other. When I pull, I can see ahead. When I push, I can't. So Isabel keeps a good lookout and rings her bell to talk to me. Did you say? Douglas was impressed. About this dude, he continued. Is he... What you wished, said his driver. Yon's the works. We maun slip in unbeknownst and find a place for Oliver. Douglas tried hard to be quiet, but the night foreman heard them and had to be told their secret. I know just a place, he said, and showed them an empty siding nicely hidden away. Oliver said goodbye and thank you, and Douglas puffed away. Yon's an enterprising engine, he thought. I won away here with Donald, but I'd have been feared to do it on my own.
The men have been working on the new engine for a long time. What's his name? The other engines kept asking. We don't know. It's a secret, was always the reply. Everyone just calls him Number 7. At last, Peter Sam could contain himself no longer. He asked the Fin Controller. The Fin Controller smiled. Wouldn't you like to know? He teased. I do. What is it? Came a chorus of voices. But I'm not telling. You'll have to wait until the naming party. Ivo Hugh, the railway's chief engineer, was going to do the naming. Even he didn't know the engine's name. But Mr. Hugh, you must know, protested Scarlowy. I'm afraid not, laughed Mr. Hugh. The name won't be painted until the last minute. It must be a place or a person, said Sir Handel. To match us, he added. I think it's a place, decided Rheneas. But why is it a secret? The engines didn't know. But Rheneas's ideas was, they thought, the best answer. On the great day, a special train was to pick up the Fin Controller, his guests, and Mr. Hugh, and bring them to the bottom station for the ceremony. Scarlowy, as the oldest engine, was going to pull it. The day was sunny. Kathy and Lizzie came early to the shed. First they cleaned Scarlowy, then they polished Peter Sam. Scarlowy whistled cheerfully as he went up the line, and by then all the other engines looked just as smart as he did. Scarlowy passed the big house where the Fin Controller lived, and went as far as the middle station. There he ran round the train and pulled it back downhill. He stopped at the big house, and when the Fin Controller and his guests were on the train, he stopped again near the cottage where Mr. Hugh lived. Scarlowy had just restarted, when, with a squealing noise, something dashed past his front wheels. He stopped quickly. What on earth? Demanded the fireman, jumping from the cab. In the long grass beside the line lay a large mother pig, and frisking round her were 7 pink piglets. Clearly, Scarlowy could go no further until they were safely caught. But they didn't want to be caught. Oh dear, fretted Scarlowy. We're going to be late for the party. I know we are. The Fin Controller, Mr. Hugh, and even some of the guests joined in the pig chase, until at last all the animals had been captured and put carefully back into the field. At the bottom station, a large crowd had gathered. All the engines, except Scarlowy, were there, and Number 7, with his name covered, simmered quietly. The minutes ticked slowly by. The manager looked at his watch. Something must be wrong, Rheneas whispered the Duke. Scarlowy should be here by now. Perhaps the Fin Controller wasn't ready, suggested Duncan. But he was firmly hushed by the others. At last, they heard a whistle in the distance. A little later, Scarlowy puffed thankfully into the station. I'm sorry we're late, Mr. Hugh said, but we've been chasing pigs. And he told them about it. However, he went on, I'm here to name an engine. I don't know what it's called yet, so I shall have to read it to you. I therefore name this engine... He pulled away the curtain. Bless my soul! No, not that! It's Ivo Hugh! He turned to the Fin Controller. I am honoured, sir. Thank you, he said. And all the little engines whistled loudly in acclamation.
Rheneas had returned from the works recently, and everyone had welcomed him home. But much had changed while he was away, and Skarloey was explaining this to Rheneas.
We have new coaches. They are different than our old ones. They are open air, no rules. We take them out on nice days and the passengers like them.
What are their names? Rheneas asked. Skarloey looked over to the other side of the yard.
Those three over there, Ada, Jane, and Mabel, they're nice coaches, but...
Skarloey paused gravely.
That can be quite temperamental, so be cautious about them.
Skarloey was right. Ada, Jane, and Mabel were proud of their open-air design, but it meant that they couldn't be used in bad weather. This made the coaches rather particular. Come along, you wretched slate trucks. You're needed. Not today, we're not, replied Ada. Sir Handel rolled his eyes. If you lot won't go, I'll be forced to take you to the quarry, like the slate cars you are. Woo! The coaches shrilled. Sir Handel secretly hoped he'd get the chance. A few days later, Sir Topham Hatt came to see Rheneas.
Edward is bringing a group of school children to see the line. I want you to take them in a special. The weather will be good, so take Ada, Jane, and Mabel.
Yes, sir, said Rheneas, but something made him dreadfully nervous inside. Rheneas coupled up to the coaches. Oh, dear, not today, groaned Ada. Jane added, The clouds in the sky. Bad day to take us out. No, no, no. Undoubtedly, Rheneas was a patient engine, but he stood for no nonsense. Rheneas pulled hard, and the grumpy coaches lagged behind him. Edward was waiting at the platform with the children. The guard's whistle blew, and Rheneas departed promptly from the station. Rheneas showed the children all of his favorite places. The children oohed and awed with interest and excitement. Rheneas didn't mind the noise from the children. He knew they were enjoying themselves. Rheneas was more bothered by the grumbling coaches. Too rough! Too rough! Keep running like that and we'll be torn to bits! Indisputably! The coaches complained and strained, and Rheneas was losing patience. Rheneas was soon climbing up a steep hill, and the tension between him and the coaches was rising. Rheneas soon found himself struggling. Stop holding back! Stop holding back! He wheezed anxiously. The coaches tittered. No, we won't! No, we won't! No, we won't! And they didn't. In a sudden snap, the coaches broke away. Accidentally, of course, and were flying down the line. Rheneas looked on in horror. Bother! Shouted Rheneas, and he tore down the hill. The coaches wailed, Help! 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 They screamed as they charged down the line. Rheneas was worried. Meanwhile, Sir Handel was pulling cars in the opposite direction. Soon he heard the commotion. What's that? Inquired Sir Handel, but his driver slammed on his brakes. Back, Sir Handel, back! Before Sir Handel could ask, the coaches came charging around the bend. Sir Handel slowly started reversing, and the coaches caught up to him with a bump. Gently braking, Sir Handel brought the train to a stop. Ha ha ha! Guffawed Sir Handel. I know a naughty train of cars when I see one. Serves you right. The coaches couldn't answer. They were out of breath. The next day, Rheneas was resting in the shed when Sir Topham Hatt came to see him.
I've heard about your, incident yesterday. I don't approve of runaway coaches,
he began impressively. Rheneas gulped. However, the children enjoyed their unique experience, especially the, impromptu roller coaster ride, as they say. And I know it wasn't your fault. Ada, Jane, and Mabel are well aware of that, and that there's always a need for more slate cars at the quarry. Rheneas chuckled. Perhaps now, he thought, those troublesome coaches had finally learned an important lesson.
Gordon was resting in a siding. It was a hot day, and the express had been heavy. I get so out of breath, he complained. But nobody cares. They just say I'll be alright after a rest. Get the Fat Controller to give you tanks in a bunker, suggested Thomas, cheekily. You feel like a new engine. We tank engines never get out of breath, you know. Perhaps it was lucky for Thomas that poor Gordon hadn't the energy to make any reply. The men worked hard on Gordon, but they couldn't make him better. You need new tubes, Gordon, they said. You'll have to go to the works to have them fitted. While Gordon was being mended, Henry pulled the express. But one morning, just before Gordon was due back, Henry was ill too. We've no spare engine, except Thomas, the inspector told the Fat Controller, but he can't pull the train on his own. Can Percy help? Asked the Fat Controller. The inspector shook his head. The two of them what Duck might manage, he suggested. It's only as far as the works, and they're sure to have a spare engine there. So the 3 tank engines were coupled together. Thomas nearest the train, Duck in the middle, and Percy at the front. Then, slowly, they started. Come on, hissed Percy importantly. We're doing it, with Duck. Pull harder, grumbled Thomas to the others. The heavy train drew out of the platform. The engines couldn't go as fast as Gordon, but the passengers didn't mind. They knew that Thomas, Percy, and Duck were doing their best. Expresses are not like branch line trains. They don't stop at all the little stations, and the engines don't have a chance to get their breath back. Soon, the 3 began to feel tired. They struggled valiantly up Gordon's hill. The strain was beginning to show. I'm glad we didn't stick there, thought Thomas. Gordon would have never let me hear the last of it. The hill proved too much for Percy. His driver blew his whistle and stopped the train. We can't take you off, Percy, said Thomas's driver. Do your best so we can keep your brakes off. It's not far. This made things harder for the other 2, but they struggled on gamely. Wind columns of steam shooting high into the air. We're nearly there, puffed Thomas and Duck together as they summoned a last brave effort. Poor Percy had no steam left to say anything. They were just passing the works when Duck found he could go no further. Thomas could not pull the heavy train on his own, and the cavalcade came to a standstill, a few yards short of the station platform. And there, watching from the works siding, stood Gordon. The Fat Controller, who had been on the train, told the 3 engines he was proud of them. You did very well to get so far. Now you deserve a rest. Duck, Percy, and Thomas were uncoupled, and a new engine took their place. As the tank engines moved wearily away, Gordon looked at Thomas and smiled. Then, he took 3 deep breaths and winked. He didn't need to say anything. Thomas knew exactly what he meant. It was nearly Christmas. Annie and Clarabelle were packed full of people and parcels. Thomas was having very hard work. Come on, he puffed. "We're feeling so full," grumbled the coaches. Thomas looked at the hill ahead. Can I do it? He puffed anxiously. Suddenly he saw a handkerchief waving from a cottage window. He felt better at once. Yes, I can, he puffed bravely. He pulled his hardest and soon was through the tunnel and resting in the station. "That was Mrs. Kyndley who waved to you, Thomas," his driver told him. "She has to stay in bed all day." "Poor lady," said Thomas. "I am sorry for her." Engines have heavy loads at Christmas time, but Thomas and Toby didn't mind the work when they saw Mrs. Kyndley waving. But then it began to rain. It rained for days and days. Thomas didn't like it, nor did his driver. "Off we go, Thomas," he would say. "Pull hard and we'll get home quickly. Mrs. Kyndley won't wave today." But whether she waved or not, they whistled when they passed the little lonely cottage. "Hello!" exclaimed Thomas's fireman one day. "Look at that!" The driver came across the cab. "Something's wrong there," he said. Hanging, flapping, and bedraggled from a window of the cottage was something that looked like a large red flag. "Mrs. Kyndley needs help, I expect," the driver said, and put the brakes on. Thomas gently stopped. The guard came squelching through the rain up to Thomas's cab, and the driver pointed to the flag. "See if a doctor's on the train, and ask him to go to the cottage. Then we'll walk back to the station and tell them we've stopped." The fireman went on to see if the line was clear in front. 2 passengers left the train and climbed to the cottage. Then the fireman returned. "We'll back down to the station," said the driver, "so that Thomas can get a good start." "We shan't get up the hill," the fireman answered. "Come see what's happened." They walked along the line and around the bend. "Jiminy Christmas!" exclaimed the driver. "Go back to the train. I'm going to the cottage." He found the doctor with Mrs. Kyndley. "Silly of me to faint," she said. "You saw the red dressing gown. Are you all safe?" asked Mrs. Kyndley. "Yes," said the driver. "I've come to thank you. There's a landslide in the cutting, Doctor. Mrs. Kyndley saw it from her window and stopped us. She saved our lives." "God bless you, ma'am," said the driver, and tiptoed from the room. They cleared the line by Christmas Day. The sun shone as a special train puffed up from the junction. First came Toby, then Thomas, with Annie and Clarabelle, and last of all, pleased to be allowed out at all, was Henrietta. The fat controller was there, and lots of other people who wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Kyndley. "Beep, beep, beep! Happy Christmas!" whistled the engines as they reached the place. The people got out and climbed to the cottage. Thomas and Toby wished they could go too. Mrs. Kyndley's husband met them at the door. The fat controller, Thomas's driver, fireman, and guard went upstairs, while the others stood in the sunshine below the window. Mrs. Kyndley was pleased with her presents. "You were all very good to me," she said. "The passengers and I," said the fat controller, "hope you'll accept these tickets for the seaside, Mrs. Kyndley, and get well in the sunshine. We cannot thank you for preventing that accident. I hope we have not tired you. Goodbye, and a happy Christmas." Then, going downstairs, they joined the group outside the window and sang some carols before returning to the train. Mrs. Kyndley is now at the seaside, getting better every day, and Thomas and Toby are looking forward to the time when they can welcome her home.